Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So today's case is going to be a solved case, but it's a very scary and unfortunate case that we can hopefully learn from. It's something that seemed to have happened completely out of nowhere. And the family of the man responsible for all of this is just surprised and baffled that all of this was even able to happen. It's one of those cases where we can see that we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors, and it shows us that we really do just need to keep a better eye on our loved ones. But with that being said, let's just get right into today's case. Today, we're going to be talking about the case of Lori Hacking. Lori Soares Hacking was born December 31st, 1976 in California. She was adopted by her parents, Thelma and Harold Soares, when she was 4 months old and had an older brother named Paul, who was also adopted. She grew up in California, but then in 1987, her parents actually got a divorce, so she relocated to Orem, Utah because the family was a part of the Mormon church, and Thelma thought that she could get more support as a single mother from the church in Utah. Obviously, Utah has a very large Mormon community and they're all about family there, so she kind of had the right idea moving over there to get more support. This was when Lori was only about 11 years old. Lori's brother, Paul, on the other hand, was in his late teens and he was about to go off on his missions trip, so he just stayed in California with his dad because it would just be a lot more easy for them. You know, instead of having the brother change schools at the last second, right before graduating, instead of uprooting his whole life and moving him to a different state right before he graduated, him and his dad just decided to stay in California. In Utah, 11-year-old Lori and her mother Thelma bonded very close because it was just the two of them and they were pretty much on their own. Lori went to Orem High School near Salt Lake City in Utah. She was described by her classmates as being kind and genuine, and those around her absolutely loved her. She was even elected class president her freshman year. She played baseball in high school and got a job at the car wash to make some extra money throughout her schooling. Orem High School is also where she met her soon-to-be husband, Mark Hacking. Mark Hacking was born into a very large Mormon family. He had 6 brothers and sisters, and his dad worked as a pediatrician, which made him very well liked around the community. Mark's father was a very good doctor who went out of his way for his patients, so the whole family was generally well known around the town and they were very well liked. They had a very large house that the family shared, of course, because, him being a physician, they were very well off. Mark was described as being athletic and he would always go hiking around the trails of Utah. He was the class clown in school and was generally well liked by his peers. He always tried to make people laugh throughout his entire life into adulthood. One notable characteristic of Mark Hacking was his ability to tell a story. On his missions trips, he was really good at going out and trying to convince people to transfer into the Mormon church. This wasn't an easy task for anyone. Of course, you're going around trying to get people to convert to your religion and trying to get them to subscribe to your ideology, but Mark did a really good job of just talking to people. He sounded believable and made people just want to listen. But also while he was on his missions trip in Winnipeg, Canada, he started to take on another lifestyle. He started smoking cigarettes, drinking, and partying, and these were things that the Mormon church definitely frowns upon. It seemed as if the moment that he was thrown into the real world, he was given all of these temptations and just gave into them pretty much right away. So he was sent home early from his missions trip, which is not a good look for the family. But like I said, Mark was kind of a good talker and was very convincing, so when he did get home, he made it kind of seem like he had just gotten into some sort of accident, not that he had gone home because he was in trouble or misbehaving. Now, some people say that his parents don't actually know the real reason that he got sent home, but in reality, I think that they probably did know, and of course were embarrassed that their son had such poor behavior that he got sent home early. So I think that they probably just helped cover up their son and, what he did and the real reason that he was sent home from his trip early. Now, like I said, Lori and Mark met in high school. And when they actually met Lori's sophomore year, his senior year, they actually met when they were on a trip to Lake Powell with some friends. Apparently, Lori hadn't really paid too much attention to Mark until he actually stuck his hand in a campfire to turn a log and he burned himself. This was just kind of his personality. He, again, was the class clown, but he was also kind of clunky and clumsy and just made people laugh all the time. So Lori helped him out, gave him first aid, and the two ended up staying up all night talking and just really connected that night and pretty much had been dating ever since. Now, there are rumors that when Mark went on his missions trip that he actually slept with another girl while he was out, which is a huge no-no in the Mormon church. It's not just cheating, but premarital sex in general, which is a huge no-no in the Mormon church. So people think that that's another reason that he got sent home. But either way, after he had returned to Utah after his trip, Lori and Mark continued dating, and this is when their relationship got a lot more serious. In 1995, Lori went to college in Weber, then transferred to the University of Utah in Salt Lake. She was a really good student. She got good grades and she had a ton of friends. She was extremely mature for her age, and even though she did like to go out and have fun with her friends and she went on these mini trips with all of her girlfriends, she stayed very committed to Mark. Then, a year before she graduated from the University of Utah in 1999, her and Mark got married. She had a great job. She was marrying the love of her life, and everyone around Lori was so happy for her, and she seemed so happy too. She seemed to have the perfect marriage, and Lori's friends described Mark as incredibly smart, funny, and committed to her. They wanted to have a family with lots of kids, and she seemed like her life was heading in just the right direction. Thelma said that Lori and Mark were this adorable couple who just seemed to be so perfect for each other, and Thelma absolutely loved Mark. Thelma said, and I quote, "I really liked him. We would sit down and complete crossword puzzles. He always came and put the lights on my Christmas tree every year. He would stop by the freeway if he saw people whose cars had stopped. I would tell him it was dangerous, but he was just a kind young man who would help anyone in need. A good kid." Now, Mark had also graduated from the University of Utah, not actually attending graduation though, because he said he was sick that day. But even after graduating, he seemed to have kind of just bounced back and forth to different low-paying jobs. Not really something that you would expect from someone with a degree. Now, I know obviously these days it is kind of common to see someone who just graduated with a relatively lower paying job because that's just how it is these days. But back then, when you graduated college, you were going to get a job in your degree, and that's that. And you shouldn't be bouncing around from different low-paying jobs, but that's what Mark ended up doing. So Lori provided a lot of the support for quite a while. She was working at Wells Fargo as a trading assistant, so she really did just make most of the money. They lived in a very small apartment with a lot of family photos spread out across the apartment, and even at this time, things seemed to be going pretty well. Now, in July of 2004, Mark was working as a psychiatric aide in the Psychiatric Care Center in the University of Utah. At this point, Mark was planning on going to medical school, so the two were very busy, with Lori working at Wells Fargo, Mark making his plans to go to med school and working as a psychiatric aide, and both were still very active in the Mormon church. Then on July 15th, 2004, Lori excitedly called her friend Holly to tell her that she was 5 weeks pregnant. Also during this time, her and Mark were planning on moving to North Carolina in August so that Mark could start med school that fall. They were really excited for this new chapter in their lives. This is pretty much exactly the life that Lori had envisioned for herself, and it was really just starting to fall into place. Now, on July 18th, the two had attended a party together and everything seemed to be going great. Those around Lori said that Lori seemed to be very happy, and even though Mark seemed to be a little bit more quiet than normal, he seemed to be pretty happy. However, all of that would change when at 10:49 a.m. on July 19th, 2004, police received a frantic phone call from Mark Hacking saying that his wife went missing. Mark told police that Lori had gone out for a jog along Memory Grove and Creek City Canyon area in Salt Lake, but hadn't returned home and hadn't gone to work. Now, going on these jogs was a very normal routine for Lori to do before going out for work, but she never returned home for this day, so Mark was really worried and had absolutely no idea where she was. She would normally wake up, go on these jogs, and then come home before going to work. So before people at her work even noticed that she hadn't shown up, Mark already knew that she was gone. Immediately, detectives started looking for Lori. Quickly, they found her car parked outside the entrance to the park, but they found absolutely no sign of Lori. Initially, police and Lori's family believed that she had been abducted. Mark went on the TV to beg for his wife to return home safely, and he seemed completely heartbroken and very upset. This case quickly caught national attention and a massive search was done around the area, but there was no sign of Lori anywhere. However, very quickly, police started to turn their sights to another possibility. While searching the home, they noticed some very strange things. The first thing detectives really noticed that made them think was this giant bouquet of flowers that was sitting on the table. Detectives said that these were very clearly "I screwed up and you're mad at me" flowers. They were in this expensive and beautiful vase, so clearly the marriage wasn't totally perfect at that time. Also, a detective noticed that Lori's purse and her wallet was still sitting at home, but I guess this wasn't too much out of the ordinary because she had just gone on a jog, and according to Mark, these aren't things that she would normally take when she went on these jogs. But a detective also noticed that the bathtub was pristinely clean and smelled a lot like bleach. And they also noticed that the sheets on the bed were perfectly washed and perfectly crisp, as if they had just recently been bought. Also, in her jewelry box on her nightstand was her wedding ring. So it was very clear to detectives that there was something wrong here, and this marriage wasn't as perfect as everyone thought that it was. Then, after digging even more, they had found out that Mark had actually just recently, like pretty much that same day, bought a new mattress. They found a hunting knife with blood still on it sitting in his drawer. They noticed little bits of blood all around the walls and the floors. Then, on top of it all, on top of all the weird things that they were finding, Lori's keys were still in the apartment when the car was at City Creek Canyon. So it was almost like she had driven there, but then went home to give back the keys and put them back on the counter for some reason, because they shared the keys to this car. There weren't two sets of keys for this car, so there was no reason that her keys would still be sitting there after she had driven the car. So at this point, detectives were pretty sure that Mark did have something to do with his wife's disappearance. Now, during their investigation, police actually received a call from an emergency operator saying that someone matching Mark's description was running around naked near a motel. When police went to go see what was going on, sure enough, Mark Hacking was running around completely naked and absolutely hysterical, screaming different things and just acting completely crazy, but he was still wearing flip-flops. Now, I feel like at this point, Mark knew that the walls were closing in on him, and he took a page out of Walter White's book, even though this was all before that. Let's just forget about that. But he wanted to look insane because he knew that he was about to be caught. But detectives knew that if he was truly running around and doing these crazy things because of some sort of mental break or some sort of mental illness, that he was sane enough that he didn't forget to put on shoes. So they knew, they had done this multiple times and they knew the signs to look out for. But either way, Mark thought that this was his best bet to be sent to a mental institution instead of being blamed for doing whatever he did to his wife. But even after all of this, police were left with so many questions. Why? Why would this seemingly loving husband just decide one day to take the life of his beautiful, loving, pregnant wife? Well, police found out that not only was Mark not enrolled in medical school, but he never even completed his undergraduate degree. Now, let's backtrack just a little bit. So, on July 16th, the day after Lori had called her friend with the exciting news that she was pregnant, Lori had actually discovered that Mark was completely lying to her about everything. She had called the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill to check on housing and financial aid, and she was told that not only was Mark not going to med school, but he hadn't even as much as sent in an application. This entire time, he had been telling Lori that he got into med school, that he had set up housing, he figured out financial aid, and he had all of these boxes checked. Even planning this big move, Lori had quit her job that she actually really enjoyed to make this big move with him, but it was all just a flat out lie. Of course, when Lori found all of this out, she left work and was just in absolute tears. Then, as we remember from earlier, the two had actually attended that party together on the 19th, where they seemed to be really happy. But after this party, Lori had actually confronted Mark about all of his lies. And this is where everything had come to a head. She had disclosed to her friends that he had lied to her other times in the past and that they did have some problems, but that everything else was perfect. Which makes me believe that his lying is probably something that she had been dealing with for quite a while and just kind of letting slide, maybe believing some of the lies and just kind of questioning them and not really knowing what to do. Like I mentioned earlier, he was really good at telling stories and just making people believe him. He was good at lying. I also want to remind you that they are both Mormons. Mormons are very serious about marriage and divorce, so one of their main beliefs is family. So if she was married, even if times were not so perfect, it would make sense that she would stay in the relationship, one, for this unborn baby that she only had just found out about, but also because in her religion, divorce is not cool. But either way, while we don't know exactly what Lori said when she confronted Mark, because most of what we do know is from what Mark had told us that she said, but she pretty much just said that she's sick of his lies, that now everyone was going to find out that he was not actually going to med school. He hadn't just been lying to Lori about this entire thing, but his entire family too. His father was actually even going to go with him to UNC Chapel Hill when they moved out there to help him settle in. So this was this entire big lie that he had set up. So this was a pretty big deal. He said that Lori said that his child was going to be growing up without a father in the household and that she's done with him. Of course, he tried to calm her down with even more lies, saying that there must have been some computer error, that he knows that there's some sort of problem, but of course she didn't buy a thing that he was trying to sell. That night that she had confronted him, the two had gone to a nearby convenience store and then came back home. Lori then went into the bedroom by herself and wrote Mark a letter. In the letter, she wrote that she was thinking of divorcing him. She said that she knew he hadn't even as much as completed his undergraduate degree, so this whole thing of graduating was also a lie, which explains why he was taking so many low-paying jobs instead of what you would expect at that time from someone with a degree. He hadn't even gone to class in 2 years. The entire time that he was supposed to be in college, he just faked it. He would literally meet her on campus for lunch together. He wrote papers and showed them to Lori and showed them to his mother. He even bought textbooks. He bought a cap and gown, but like I said, he said that he was too sick to actually go to the ceremony. He just went so far in this lie that he might have just gone to school. It probably would have just been easier, but he didn't. He came up with this entire thing to make himself look like a completely different person than what he actually was. In this letter, Lori said that she was going to tell everyone what was going on. As she was sitting there writing the letter, she was crying. She was completely heartbroken, but Mark was outside in the living room playing his Nintendo, just letting his anger stew. But anyways, after writing this letter, Lori fell asleep. However, after reading this letter, Mark pretty much blamed Lori for everything. He thought that it was her duty to stand by him no matter what, forgive him for everything, and just completely move on with their lives. Clearly, he didn't take any responsibility for her wanting to step back and no longer wanting to be a part of this marriage. He thought that it was all of her fault that their marriage was failing. He was so narcissistic that he truly believed that it was her fault, that because, he built up this entire story, but because she was going to tell everyone that she was the one that was destroying everything. So as he was reading this letter, he was getting more and more angry for what she was doing to him. He knew that the next day he would probably wake up and she would be on the phone with his parents, with her parents, with his siblings, telling them all that Mark Hacking is a complete fraud. So, as she is sleeping, as he gets more and more angry, he grabbed his .22 caliber rifle, stood over her, and shot her in the head. For some reason, this is what he thought was going to solve his problems, but it clearly wasn't very well thought through. Here she was, laying in a pool of blood on her own bed, and he had to do something to cover his tracks. So the first thing he does is go back to the convenience store that they were just at that night before all of this happened, asked for a pack of cigarettes, I guess, so that he could smoke and clear his head. Now, in the surveillance footage that they caught, as the store clerk turns around to actually grab the cigarettes, he can be seen just kind of looking at his hands as if he was thinking to himself, what have I just done? Or maybe he was checking for blood or other marks on his hands. I don't know. But either way, he gets back to the apartment after doing this, and of course, the pillow top is covered in blood, so he took the pillow top off, cutting it off with his hunting knife. He put Lori and this pillow top into a plastic garbage bag, then put those items along with his gun and the pillows themselves into the car, and put the mattress on top of the car, and drove to a dumpster behind the ward house, which is basically a house of worship, to get rid of the mattress. Then he drove to the psychiatric hospital where he worked to dispose of Lori's body there. Now, this hospital had motion censoring cameras all around that picked up Mark actually carrying something that very clearly looked like a body into the dumpster, which is just such a stupid mistake and is one of the very many stupid mistakes that he thankfully made. I mean, how do you work somewhere and not know that they have cameras picking up everything? Now, they couldn't tell for sure if this was Mark in the camera footage because it was pretty low quality. It was at night, so it's not like this was a nail in the coffin type of thing, but still pretty bad. So this is when he went back to his apartment and cleaned up the hunting knife. Clearly not very well, because we know earlier that detectives had found it with blood still on it. And then after cleaning it, he put it back in his drawer. There were also spots of blood where her body was. So this is when he came up with the idea that he would say that she just went running and never came back. So at around 5 a.m. that morning, he left her car where it would later be found at Creek Canyon, but he left the seat pushed all the way back, so it was very obvious that it was someone much taller than Lori, who was 5'4", who had been driving the car. But either way, thinking that he covered most of his tracks, he went back to his apartment at around 6 a.m. that morning, pretty much to clean up the rest of the place. Then, at around 9 a.m., he went to the local mattress store. Witnesses at that local mattress store say that he didn't really look nervous at all, just that he went in, quickly paid for his mattress, which cost him about $500, and then left. And he paid for this on his credit card, which would later be confirmed because, obviously police looked at bank statements and found that he, for some reason, bought a new mattress the same day that his wife went missing. But then at about 10:30 a.m., Mark called Thelma to let her know that Lori went on this jog and never came back. So then him, Thelma, and a bunch of other friends went around looking for Lori before Mark called police to report her missing at around 10:40 a.m., which brings us to where we left off with Mark running around naked. But like I said, police had seen this type of thing before, so they just knew that it was a show. But again, either way, they sent him to the University of Utah Psychiatric Unit to be watched. So now we're at the point where, despite Mark's ability to lie and come up with a convincing story, he has made so many mistakes in trying to cover up his crime that it just made it very obvious. After seeing all of the evidence within the house, they actually did find the letter that Lori wrote to Mark, and in the dumpster, they had found the mattress that he had dumped. They found the surveillance video from the psych ward where he dropped off Lori's body and examined the footage from that convenience store, so they were pretty much able to come up with a timeline of events that happened that night. But at this point, they still didn't know where Lori's body actually was. So Mark's brothers actually went to the psych ward where he was to ask him if they could just tell the authorities where she was. They pretty much just gave Mark the afternoon to think about it, and when they returned in the evening, Mark confessed everything to them. He basically just told the brothers of the entire timeline of everything that we had just discussed previously, that Lori had called the med school, found out that he was lying, left work in tears, went to this party with Mark, and looked to be in good spirits. This either means that she was kind of choosing to believe the lie about the computer malfunction that Mark had just told her, or, was in a little bit of denial, or that she was just trying to put on a happy face for her friends. But either way, again, as we know, she did end up confronting him about it a few days later when he admitted everything to her. This is when she wrote the letter about not wanting to be married to this giant liar, and then went to bed after all of this. This is when Mark said that he started packing all of his boxes, and he said that as he was doing so, he came across his rifle, and according to him, that is when this entire idea popped into his head. But obviously, it's a lot more likely that he had already had this idea in his head, then decided that he was gonna grab his rifle and then was gonna use it. Then at around 1 a.m., that is when he shot his wife. He wrapped her up in trash bags, cut off the mattress top, and got rid of everything. Very poorly, I might add. So after this confession from the psych ward, Mark's brothers went to police, and he was arrested on August 2nd and was transferred to county jail. This is when he was charged with first-degree murder and 3 counts of obstruction of justice. So at this point, all searches for Lori were completely called off, and they were now searching for a body. On October 1st, 2004, after a massive, exhaustive search across 10 acres of landfill with the help of cadaver dogs, Lori's remains were found in the Salt Lake County landfill. Mark went to trial and actually pled guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for dropping the charges of obstruction of justice. On June 6th, 2005, Mark was sent to 6 years to life, which was the maximum sentence the judge could give under Utah law, which is just ridiculous. The actual law is actually only 5 years to life for felony first-degree murder, but because he had used a rifle, the minimum sentence was brought up a whole entire year. But then a month later, in July of 2005, the Utah Board of Pardons actually decided that Mark was not going to be receiving his parole hearing until 2035, which means that he will be serving at least 30 years. But this case was very highly publicized, and there was a massive public outcry when people realized just how lenient Utah's maximum sentence is. They said that most people do end up waiting 18 to 35 years to be considered for parole, but either way, this caused what they called a public perception problem, which I guess I get. There aren't really any murderers that are actually being let out after 5 or 6 years, at least hopefully, but even having the possibility is scary, and that possibility shouldn't even be there. We all know that getting off for good behavior and other things is possible, so it shouldn't even be possible. But either way, because of this, on March 20th, 2006, the Utah House Bill 102, also known as Lori's Law, was signed into law. This increased the minimum penalty for someone convicted of first-degree murder to 15 years. Now, after all of this was said and done, Lori's family actually removed the name Hacking from Lori's headstone because obviously he didn't want to be in her life anymore, so they didn't think it was appropriate for her to be considered a part of their family anymore. In my research, it seems as if Mark at least feels bad for what he did and knows that he's right where he belongs in prison. And as he puts it, he's trying to right the wrongs that he's done in his life, which is great and all, but again, he's right. He's exactly where he belongs, and there's no reason that he should ever be let out, even if this was something to cover up his lie or whatever. Even if he's never going to do it again, he's right where he belongs. But either way, this case was such a strange one, and researching it was very interesting because I can't even imagine making up this elaborate lie and then blaming someone else for finding out and then wanting nothing to do with it. Clearly, he has some narcissism problems and is not someone who should be forgiven, in my opinion, but at this point, Lori's mother has accepted what has happened and has decided to forgive Mark. She will never be okay with what he did, but she just needs closure and to be at peace, which is so incredibly strong and mature of her to do. So that is pretty much all I have for today's video. I know that this is such a ridiculous case, and I'm really glad that he did such a bad and sloppy job of covering everything up so that, justice could be served pretty much right away. But honestly, it is just crazy what some people will do to keep up with this perception of what they're trying to present themselves to the world. I just wonder, when was this lie going to end? Was he just going to pretend to be going to med school for 10 more years? Make Lori support the both of them? What happens when he was going to graduate? Was he just going to be sick again? Was he just going to pretend to work as a physician after that? Where was this physician's salary going to come from? How was he expecting to be able to take care of a child just on Lori's salary while he just messed around for hours and hours and hours while pretending to be in school? I just don't understand what end game he had in mind, but clearly he didn't think it through very well. He was going to be found out someday, and he has to have known that. I guess he didn't think very many things through, because now, instead of just being known as the family disappointment, he's known as a murderer. A much worse title, if you ask me. Mark's family is disgusted with him. They did not raise him like this, and they loved Lori. They wanted nothing bad to happen to her. They do not think that she deserves this. They did not take Mark's side. And it's just as if he killed another family member of theirs. And again, we can see that with Mark's brothers actually going and trying to get him to confess, because again, they loved Lori. She was a part of the family, and It's just so upsetting that this seemingly normal guy is capable of all of this. Lori didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to be in a relationship with someone who continuously lied to her her entire life. She deserved to be the mother that she always wanted to be. She deserved to go on and live her life, but Mark selfishly took that away from her to cover up his lie, to cover up his mistake, to cover up the life that he was trying to portray, when in reality he was a complete fraud. But that's something that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life. So anyways, that is where I'm going to end this video. Honestly, I could ramble on and on and on about just how selfish and awful Mark Hacking is. He is a fraud. It's just so bizarre that this entire thing was able to happen. No one saw it coming. No one thought that he was capable of this, but he was telling such a big lie that he just thought that he needed to do whatever he needed to do to cover it up. Clearly, he probably felt some sort of pressure from his family. We know that his dad was a physician. His dad and mom probably put the reins on him and told him that he needs to be successful, especially after he got sent home from his missions trip. He didn't want to be the family disappointment. He wanted to be successful, but thought that the way of doing that was to just tell everyone that he was doing all these amazing things instead of actually going out and doing them. And because of his selfish lies, another human life was lost. But either way, like I said, that is where I'm going to end this video. Like I said, I could just ramble on and on and on about it, but that is where I'm going to leave it for now. If you liked this video, please make sure to leave this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I put out new true crime and mystery videos every single week. Don't forget to follow my Twitter and Instagram. Both will be linked down below. If you have absolutely any case suggestions, please make sure to send them to my email at RachelShannonCases@gmail.com. With that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!